they know that if they keep their audience angry, if they make them feel like women are just terrible, they'll keep tuning in.
You're listening to Good is in the Details. I'm Gwendolyn Dolske.
And I'm Rudy Salo.
And this is the podcast where we learn what we didn't know in the spirit of Socrates, all with the aim of a happy life with intellectual growth and critical thinking. Today's guest caught my attention when I was scrolling on TikTok. He has a podcast and a social media presence that is devoted to discussing modern dating culture and in the context of countering red pill content. What is red pill content? It is this growing force of a description of the way in which men and women should be. Those descriptions can be rather confining. They can be damaging, but they are very, very, very popular. So Rafael Gomez, our guest, who started his own podcast called Women on Men, where he is discussing what do women really want in dating and is taking this counter stance against the inflated notion of an alpha male. Rudy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a timely topic, right? There's a lot of creators out there that are trying to capitalize on anger. There's this anger economy these days. We do a good job of explaining how that danger economy, creator economy is going on. Why has it exploded? What is the evolution of that anger economy? And what are the impacts of it? It's really tragic. I think it's too early to tell, Gwen, in any way, shape, or form. I haven't gotten in there in any shape or form, but look, school shootings. There was a horrible tragedy in Minnesota the other day. You can't stop thinking about it. And the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear about that is, okay, who did this? Why? Is this somebody who obviously has some mental problems? Were they exposed to this anger economy? Like, that's the danger that we're all worried about, and we want to know how we can help stop it.
Yeah, and this is also great for parents because one of the things is that people are getting sucked into this type of content, that anger economy. I hadn't heard that phrase before. I think that's great.
Yeah, I just made that up. That was pretty good.
You did?
Yeah, that was I'm kind of proud of myself. Yeah.
That was really good. Well, something that Rafael said is that he was influenced by the show Adolescence. Did you see that yet, Rudy? I'm only 3 episodes in.
but
you'll love it.
It's definitely on the list. Kate and I are talking about, we should watch that, and we're just never in the right state of mind, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's not a relaxing show, but one of the things that I think you would really like too, Rudy, is since you're so interested in film, not only the subject matter, but the method in which they shot it is absolutely extraordinary. It's all done in one take. It's just amazing. Okay, so anyway, that show is really trying to raise the alarm and show how young boys are being trained to essentially not like themselves and not like women. It's having a lot of cultural pushback. Like, you see, the reality is that we have violence in our culture among the youth. We can't just talk about the problem, but we have to work out solutions. And I love that you brought that up toward the end of the episode. How are we going to combat this? But first of all, we have to lay down, what is it? I had to ask, what exactly is red pill content? I don't really get it. Is it real or is it just to make money? So Rafael was able to give us a lot of insight and also his motivation for wanting to do something about it by creating a platform that is extremely successful, and you'll get all the links in the show notes. Okay, Rudy, what are we going to call this?
What about anger problems with the creative anger economy? I don't know, something along those lines. I put the clay out there, and you mold it very, very well. So I'm going to leave that to you. Quite frankly, we've gotten a lot of feedback from people saying, hey, we like the 3 slot thing in your podcast episodes, but that doesn't work for everything. So I'm going to leave it to you, but maybe we double down on my genius.
Anger economy is definitely going in the title. Okay, let's talk about the manosphere and countering that culture with the producer of Women on Men, Rafael Gomez. Let's get into it. Rafael, there are so many things that I have to ask, but I think what I'm going to do is just start at the very beginning with your work, because it is not, all that common to find men who are so publicly advocating for women, but you are also advocating for the well-being of men when it comes to gender dynamics. How did you develop an interest for this, or say this is something that you wanted to do? I'm really really curious how that came about.
Sure. I was scrolling through social media like most people do, and I
Mhm.
started to come across a lot of this content, like some of the Andrew Tate stuff, Fresh and Fit, and whatever. And those came up and they were very intriguing. Not that it was like grabbing me in terms of it sounding like truth, but it sounded like something that I felt a lot of men could get sucked into and start to believe it. I started to read online about male loneliness and male suicide rates, and I started to see that there's a lot of connections with men who consume this content and their poor well-being. I've looked at several studies and I've talked to all the men basically who follow this stuff, and I said someone's got to say something. I need to step in. And what these people do typically, like Fresh and Fit and whatever, is they interview women and they try to push sort of a red pill agenda. And so I decided, well, I can interview women, normal women on the street, and just ask them normal questions and try to counter that content and just say not everything you're seeing on here is accurate. Hope that I can reach some men and pull them out of the red pill rabbit hole, basically.
For our audience, what exactly is meant by red pill?
Yeah, so I use that as a catch-all term. I would say if you want to go by their traditional definition, I would say The Rational Male, which was written by Rollo Tomasi, was kind of the first book that made modern red pill what it is today. It basically tries to explain quote unquote female nature.
Mm.
That kind of pseudoscience is compelling when you start talking about women's evolutionary biology and you're a young man who doesn't know how to date or doesn't know how to talk to women. You're going to find it compelling and you might say, okay, well, maybe I need to adjust how I talk to women or how women view me. So a lot of the red pill narratives are around hypergamy, for example, that women only date up. They only date men who are richer and better looking, and they constantly are on the lookout for the next guy that meets that criteria. A lot of men focus, instead of focusing on inward traits, what makes them attractive or what would make them great in long-term relationships, they focus on superficial things like looks, money, status, and they think that is what's going to attract women. When men often realize they aren't necessarily going to become some high status rich guy, they start to fall into what's called the black pill, which is kind of a defeatist mentality that if you're not exactly a quote unquote Chad, which is what they call like their idealized kind of man, their idealized alpha male, if you don't meet that criteria, then you're doomed and you're never going to meet a woman and no woman's ever going to look your way. So this kind of resentment has festered online. If you go to any comment section on any of these channels, you will see some of the most hateful things said about women to women.
One of the questions I've been thinking about is gender roles or pushing them is something that has been part of the culture for a very long time. So I'm thinking about the film with Marilyn Monroe and Marrying a Millionaire, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, that musical where the brothers go and kidnap women to make them wives.
I forgot about that movie. Yeah, I saw that when I was younger. Oh my goodness.
I know. I tell my students about that film that I watched it as a little girl, and it wasn't until I was older that I realized like the gravity of this film, that they're all singing, grabbing the women as they kidnap them. And then by the end of the film, all of the women are in love. So we have these images. And then in the 70s, things shifted a bit. You've got Star Wars and Princess Leia. You've got Charlie's Angels. And so these women are representing a shift, an imperfect one, because those women were also white and rail thin. Like they still had to fit a beauty standard in order to pull off that they could be strong. So that's the 70s. But then today, we fast forward to today with these online communities. What is different about the red pill ideology from ideas from the past?
Yeah, so I think the shift, not only in pop culture and when you see representation in film and movies of strong women that don't necessarily focus on relationships, I think that helps shift the culture. But I think one of the bigger shifts is that women have become more financially independent. And for a lot of history, women did depend on men for financial resources. Now that has kind of changed because women are now more educated than men, especially the younger generation. Young women are outpacing young men, and women don't necessarily need men just for a providership. There's a great book called For the Love of Men by Liz Plank.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about how the world has changed and the dynamics of the economy have changed where women are owning more homes. And so men who have only known how to be quote unquote providers and protectors, they never develop things like emotional intelligence, or they never develop things that make a great partner, not just someone who goes to work and provides a paycheck. Those shifts have allowed women to be a bit more choosy choosy about who they want to be with. They either decide they want to be with somebody that's going to add value to their life on an emotional or deeper level versus they go to work, they come home, they watch TV or whatever. So I think women have been able to now, since they don't rely on men for resources, filter out men that they just don't feel like they want to be with. And that dynamic has made a lot of men upset, and they don't know how to adapt to this world. A lot of men are uncomfortable with their partner making more than them. Women that I talk to, and 30% of marriages right now, women out earn their partners, and about 46% of marriages, it's equal, or the women out earns. So it is changing in that way, but I think men have to also be okay with the fact that they're going to be more of an equal partner and not necessarily this dominant force in the marriage or the relationship. And I think that has changed the quote unquote power dynamics of dating and relationships.
And like you mentioned, Liz Plank's book, which I really enjoyed too, and I love the title, it's For the Love of Men, that it seems like a lot of discussions are leaving out the fact that this is also for the benefit and well-being of men, that this has
Absolutely.
disastrous consequences because they're being robbed of the joy of a relationship, of conversation.
Yeah.
There's not a benefit to this red pill mentality because, like you said, it causes more loneliness, more depression, suicide rates. So how is it that it continues? I'm wondering, when you have encountered this type of podcast, like when you were on the whatever podcast, what is it like behind the scenes? Is it just for show? Because since this content isn't actually benefiting men in any measurable way, is it just for them to make money? Do they really believe it?
Yeah, I do think there's definitely a large grift that's occurring. I do think these men don't respect women, but I don't think it's to the levels that they portray on their podcast or their shows. They know that if they keep their audience angry, if they make them feel like women are just terrible, they'll keep tuning in, because the men who are struggling with dating or have frustrations, or maybe they went through a bitter divorce, those men commiserate in these comment sections and commiserate in this content. They join the ranks of other men that feel the same way, and they enjoy kind of dumping on women, and like it makes them feel better about themselves. And so that content resonates, and I think they make a lot of money doing that. For example, Myron Gaines on Fresh and Fit, I mean, he's one of the most outlandish, offensive people on earth. The things he says about women is horrible. He wrote a book called Women Deserve Less. He just talks about how women are dumb and etc. He talks constantly about how men need to be this high status male, or otherwise women aren't going to look your way. And he recently got dumped by his one girlfriend, and she went to some blue collar guy. And it's like, why would you continue to listen to this guy when he doesn't have a relationship? He claims you need to be this thing to keep a woman, and then he loses a woman based on completely non-superficial factors. So I definitely think there's a grift. They are making a lot of money on it. Well, I ask men constantly in my content, if red pill's not helping you date, if it's not improving your life, why do you continue to listen to it? I haven't got really an answer. I do think there are different segments of the red pill community. For example, pickup artists are part of the red pill community. A lot of men, when I'm talking about women, they only see them as sex. And they're like, well, what if I just want to hook up? And it's like, well, I'm not making content for men who just want to hook up, but red pill content does. It makes it so you can learn these tricks and manipulation tactics to be able to maybe get a woman to maybe sleep with you that night, but it never develops into anything long term. And these men don't learn how to make long form connections and maintain long relationships. They end up kind of in the same place. A lot of the men who fall into the red pill pipeline, it starts with simple searches like how to get confidence or how to get a girlfriend. And then the grifters latch onto these searches, and they basically try to make a man feel like he's not man enough. And in order to be a man, you must do this and you must dominate the relationship. And that's what women are looking for. These men are being misguided because they don't know what they're looking for. So it often starts innocent. It starts with physical fitness, but they never talk about any sort of mental fitness or emotional fitness. It's only superficial things that they focus on. That keeps men lonely and single.
Is there another common denominator? Is there anything similar in the people who are drawn to this content when it comes to either geography or economic status, or let's say talent that has to do with hobbies? Or is there any common thread?
What I've seen, it does seem to be affecting the younger generation more. And I do think COVID had a very big part to play in why red pills become, I think, more popular today. Let's say you were 12 when COVID started. All you could do is be online because you couldn't go to school. You couldn't interact with people. So you watch YouTube, and YouTube is notorious. There's a book called Men Who Hate Women, and they did some experiments on how quickly men get fed red pill pill content when they're on YouTube. And so if you're 12 years old and you start to see this stuff, the algorithm's going to continue to feed stuff that you're watching. These men never learned, or these boys now, they're like, let's say they're 17 now. COVID was 5 years ago. So they're still young and they never really learned a lot of the social skills, and they basically grew up online. I think the common thing I'm seeing, because it's not just Americans, it's happening in England as well. It's happening in Canada too. It's really, I think, men who are perpetually online is mainly the thing that I've seen. Because I ask women, has a guy ever asked you out in person? And a lot of women say no. That's foreign to me because when I was younger, I was constantly asking women out. Even though we had online things, we had some social media, but people are living online more than ever. A lot of these men haven't developed a lot of the social skills required to talk to women in real life, not only to ask them out, but also to be interesting on a date, interesting through a lifetime of a relationship. So the trend that I see more than anything, I don't think it's any sort of economic correlation. I think more than anything, it's young men who have grown up online and all they know is what they've heard through the internet.
I'm even thinking of some of the old school ideas about gender roles, something that could even go back to like I Love Lucy. Let's say Ricky Ricardo is supposed to be the one who's in charge, but Lucy is the one with all the crazy ideas. And that would be like this traditional kind of dynamic. But when you look at it closely, Ricky loves Lucy. He's even silly. Like when she announces that they're going to have a baby, I mean, the way that he's emotional and excited, and one of the famous scenes from when it was ready for her to go deliver and he's jumping all over the place and so excited. Even if we were to say this is tradition and that there are gender roles, or what was presented didn't bar men from experiencing love. It might not be the kind of gender dynamics that I would want now, but
Sure.
what is being taught in this red pill content does not actually resemble anything that historically has described a man.
Yeah, when I debated Andrew Wilson and a lot of these, and Myron will also say that they long for the 1950s. They think it's such a great time. They try to paint the picture that life was so much better then. And it's like, maybe, but it was often better for just one sect of people, typically white men. That's who a lot of these people who make this content are. I do think that because the dynamics in dating have shifted where women don't necessarily rely on men as much, red pill content is compelling because men who are not dating feel like if we go back to that, then they'll have success in dating again. If women stop working, if women stop voting, things will go back to the Ricky and Lucy days. Women will stay at home. They'll depend on men. They need men. They'll only be incubators for children. And that's what a lot of the red pill men long for.
To this grift or to this money making and the shock value, because I, like you, was scrolling on TikTok and then I came across some of this red pill content and then I ended up watching it like a train wreck. I couldn't turn away from it. And then the algorithm, of course, fed me more of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were in person on the whatever podcast, were there instances where you could tell that there was this intentional shock value in what they said, that maybe it wasn't totally authentic, but it was for the audience, like something to try to trigger you and get you going?
I'm trying to think. I would say Andrew Wilson debates for the sake of debate. He will make an argument just to win an argument. He doesn't necessarily believe what he says. I've done a couple debates with him, and David Cooley's another one who's also a terrible person. I brought up incels and the data on incels and how they're depressed. They have a higher rate of suicide. They have a higher rate of severe depression. He made the claim there is no such thing as involuntary celibate men because men can pay for sex. That is such a silly argument because one, maybe you can't afford it. Two, it's illegal. Three, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the kind of sex that these men want. They probably want a woman to really care for them and maybe have an intimate relationship with. But they make this argument as if there's no such thing as incels, and yet there are involuntary celibate men saying, I am an involuntarily celibate and I would like to change that. And instead of focusing on how these men can improve their lives or attract women, they just want to make these kinds of arguments. And David Cooley, the other guy I debated when I brought up incels, he said something so egregious, and you feel free to edit this out, but he said that not only can men pay for it, but men are benevolent because they don't just take it from women. So there's no such thing as involuntary celibates. And that is the shock value stuff that I think they try to put out there. I will say, even his audience after that debate, I looked at the comment section and they were like, that's not a great argument, man. Like, maybe don't make that argument. And which is rare for, I think, people to turn on the host. But that's the kind of stuff that they do say, because I don't think they have interest in truth. I don't think they have any interest in actually helping people. Shock, controversy, arguments, those things get views and clicks and shares.
I was thinking of the philosopher John Stuart Mill in the 1800s. He started to debunk this very thing that people are talking about now, this notion that strength is the measurement of who is on the pedestal. And John Stuart Mill argued against this by saying men don't measure each other's intelligence or value that way. So why would you put that on a woman? So for example, like if a man walks into a room and he's very, very tall, another man doesn't immediately assume that he is wiser and more brilliant than me just by virtue of him being larger. And then by the same token, a man wouldn't, I don't know, like walk and encounter Stephen Hawking, and by virtue of the fact that Stephen Hawking is in a wheelchair, assume that they were brighter and gave more to the world. So if men don't do that within each other because they realize that's a silly standard of measurement to have an idea of a hierarchy, then John Stuart Mill is saying, then why would you do that to women? Just because women, generally speaking, have a smaller stature, it doesn't follow that they have any less mental capacity. This argument by these guys always talking about strength as the measurement or evidence of male superiority just baffles me, because they wouldn't use that on each other.
Yeah, I think
Unless the hierarchy just means physical force, but then in that case, any animal in the wild pretty much would be considered superior to them, but they wouldn't yield to that because they recognize that reason is the key ingredient and women have reason.
Yeah, I think if we were in like complete survival mode, maybe strength matters a lot more. But in a modern society, I think men value wealth and status more than anything else now.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that is what's going to make you powerful. That's what's going to make you attractive. Obviously, being tall and strong doesn't hurt either. But when these red pill guys or these guys online think about an alpha male, I don't think they think about Elon Musk. But I do think they view him as a way of like, oh, well, he's got enough money to compensate for whatever other things he lacks. And I do think anyone who's rich and has a lot of women and has a lot of cars, those are the guys that these men often look up to, like Andrew Tate. And Andrew Tate is also, you know, a kickboxer, so he's got the physical strength as well. A lot of men do look up to him as kind of this template for manhood. But I agree that doesn't necessarily measure someone's value. It doesn't measure how smart they are, how kind they are. There's a lot of other traits that I think matter, but a lot of these guys online are only looking at the superficial traits as their measurement.
But even in a survival situation, like you said, maybe strength, I would say ingenuity. Like if you can MacGyver yourself out of a situation, so that's how somebody of a smaller stature would be able to survive. If they don't have the ability to think, the critical thinking skills, it's not going to work. So if there's a being that is bigger and faster and deadlier, the human being has to come up with some sort of a mechanism to be able to survive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally appreciate this discussion. And for some reason, it was bringing back a lot of, I want to say memories, but I don't want to like give the impression that I was quote unquote an incel at any time or was in this community in any way, shape, or form. But I want to test Rafael's knowledge on something. Rafael, you ever heard of a gentleman from the 80s and 90s, perhaps even into the early 2000s? I can't recall his how long he was around for, but do you remember a guy by the name of Tom Likas?
No, I don't think I've ever heard of him.
Okay, so Tom Likas was very popular, at least in Southern California. And I think his radio show was a nationally syndicated show. And his whole spiel was not that dissimilar from what you are talking about with these communities and these men that are angry and have these feelings towards women. You'd put it on in the afternoon as you were driving. He was the drive home radio talent, right? When you were driving in the morning commuting, you would listen to Howard Stern. I mean, Howard Stern has certainly evolved and matured. It's not the same Howard Stern that we were listening to when we were kids. And if you ever literally listen to him, like sure, like at one point in time he was a shock jock and was out there, but he
For
was
sure.
very smart and very nuanced and became a phenomenal interviewer. And he'll talk about his own evolution. And then when you commuted home, you listen to Tom Likas, right? And Tom
Mhm.
Likas' whole spiel was a lot of this stuff that's out there today. What's my point? Bringing back history. My point is this stuff has always been around there. It is entertaining. Some people listen to it. Some people like it. And now with social media, it's the proliferation of these talking heads, shock jocks, etc. Because anybody with a microphone and a phone can go out there and do it. And I'm not trying to belittle the danger of this in any way, shape, or form. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, look, this stuff has been around for a long time and it's been entertaining to some people. Why is it that much more dangerous today? Is it because of the proliferation? Are we in an even more violent era? What is it that we should be more afraid of today than just saying, well, it's been around for a while. Like, why are we talking about this? That's my legitimate question.
I think that's a great question. I'll say a couple things. One, back when people were listening to radio, one, you don't have a face. I mean, often you weren't looking at the person. I think that does change the dynamics a little bit. But also, back when radio was more popular, people were out in the world and actually interacting. I think now people can just live in their room and consume this content and never interact with a woman for weeks. That is going to change how you view women. That's going to change how you see them because all you know about them is what you're hearing online versus going out in the world, even going to your job, even going to school or whatever and talking to women and just realizing, oh, maybe the stuff I'm hearing online isn't true. I think you could listen to Howard Stern and just kind of brush it off as shock jock and then interact with someone and not think much more about it. But I think the proliferation, as you said, and also the 24/7 consumption of it, where you can just consume and consume and consume for hours, is different than these maybe hours you were getting in the car if you happen to catch it that day. If you don't happen to catch whatever debate, you can always watch it later. I think because people are more isolated from home, there's a lot of social skills and social interactions that a lot of people have lost. I think COVID made that even worse. But I do think the more online we are, the less social skills we have. And I think that also creates a lot less empathy out in the real world because I've talked to women on the street and guys don't even ask them out anymore. I was mentioning that earlier that I just find that so bizarre. But I think back when Lycus was on the radio and Howard Stern was on the radio, guys were still asking women out.
Yeah, no, they probably were. I mean, and there was also the proliferation of those. I don't know, some book. I don't know if it was called The Game. I mean,
Yeah.
and then you watch Magnolia and you watch Tom Cruise and the character that he plays in there, these gurus, if you will, these player gurus. I mean, it's always been around, at least for the last 30 or 40 years. And that probably is, my guess is, as feminism and women have gotten more quote unquote power or elevation, et cetera, there's been this backlash by certain segments of men who feel like their confidence has been shot or they're no longer as valuable as they once were. And if you look at a timeline, right, you look at something as a historical perspective, you could probably see the mass amount of proliferation of these gurus, since the 60s, the 70s, et cetera, as men's quote unquote power has shifted down, if you will, or has tried to equalize, even though most people would say it's still not equal. And I just like to look at everything from a historical perspective. I like to look to the past to see like how it can predict the future.
Mm-hmm.
Your point is a good one. It's the 24/7 access. And with 24/7 access, the audience expands. Every time you feel angry and you feed that anger, it spins and it's fuel. There's different talking heads out there. You could fill your day, you could fill your year with all these different talking heads. That's fine. I see what the problem is. But honestly, really, what's the actual real world solution that can be had? I don't mean to sound hopeless. I think one of the points of philosophy, I think one of the points of these conversations is to try to figure out how to make things 5% better or 10% better. I think it's impossible to make things 100% better. But so how do we make things 5% better? What can we do if we see friends or sons or nephews or uncles that are going down this road? What can we do?
So let's start with younger men. I think if parents are aware of what's happening online, one of the things that I've seen a parent say that they did with their child, which I think is probably the best solution I've heard for trying to not indoctrinate young men into this pipeline, is to actually put the content on and watch it with them and talk to them about it through it and say, what do you think about what this guy just said? Or what do you think about what they're saying here? And have an honest conversation with them about it. So that way it's not stigmatized, or it's not like, hey, get off of YouTube, and you're not just restricting them from YouTube, because that's a fool's errand. To actually show them the content and have a discussion with them about it and try to guide them in the right direction, rather than just restricting YouTube or telling them, hey, that stuff's stupid, turn it off or whatever. Like actually having a dialogue with your son about the dynamics of relationships and how to view women. I think that's the first step for, I think, the younger generation. I do think the other step that is what I'm attempting to do, and I'm only, I think, 3-4 months into this, so I'm still getting my feet under me. We need more positive male role models. And I think on YouTube, there are very few. I think on TikTok, there are a few. I have now seen more. I'm not the first guy that's noticed this. There's definitely some more men out there that have been trying to fight it. I went to the Whatever podcast to try to bring the fight directly to them. And that's what I want to do, is continue to be a voice. And I think a lot of men are starting to see this as well. If we can create counter content to show what positive masculinity looks like, or we can show positive and healthy relationship dynamics are, that it's not about dominance and control, and it's not always about status and money. If we can show and deprogram a lot of the current generation of older men who have now started to fall into this, if I can even be honest for a moment, even in my marriage, listening to this content, it still seeps into my head a little bit. Like I hear these voices and it's like, I need to be in control of my marriage, and I have to shake that off. And it's like, what is that about? What, like, it just gets you. I think there just has to be counter content that is proliferated as much. And I think it's going to be harder because it's not as controversial. But I can say that even again, in the short span of time that I've been doing this, men have reached out to me and said, I'm really glad you're doing this, because all I see is this other stuff. And maybe I'm seeing that it's not always true. So many of my comments are men who have realized that the red pill didn't work for them and have gotten away from it. So I do think if more of these people who have left the red pill can also speak up, I think that's going to be very valuable. I had a podcast recording once with this guy named Glenn Lawrence. He used to work with Rollo Tomasi, who was considered the godfather of the red pill. And he left that podcast because he said that while they're trying to quote unquote give men the descriptors they need to become attractive to women, it doesn't give men enough guidance on what to do once they, let's say, develop their physical abilities or they develop their confidence. It ends up leading down to anger and hatred and frustration and bitterness. These podcasters just kind of wipe their hands. They're like, well, that's not my problem. And I think there needs to be people who say, well, it's all our problems. I'm very nervous for the young men today. I know that suicide rates for men are skyrocketing. And I do think loneliness, depression, and this hopelessness that a lot of men feel. And I think the more they listen to this stuff, the more hopeless they feel. So right now, I do think that it's like parents need to be aware. I think the show Adolescence was a very big eye opener for a lot of people. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but if you haven't, I highly recommend it.
I just started it.
It's fabulous. That kickstarted my content. I saw it. I knew I needed to get involved. And I was like, okay, that's in England. That's not even here in the United States. If they're seeing it on that level where they need to make a show like that, then there needs to be more awareness brought to this issue. I think we're just starting to get there, I think.
One of the other consequences, I hear the straw man, oh, you just hate men or you're against masculinity, which is not true. Like that's not what the case is.
Not
But
at all.
one of the byproducts of this, and I think you mentioned it earlier, but I can see it in the university system. Education, boys and young men are falling behind. So all of this content is prioritizing the things that aren't going to actually help you enjoy your life. Money is great. I am not anti-money at all. It's just that it's the byproduct of building up skills and talent and character. It comes after. But if you prioritize it as the first, then you're just going to have a lot of emptiness. You might have things and then your physical appearance. So by investing all of this time into how am I going to be a millionaire and how am I going to have a six pack, then they're less likely to sit down and, read a novel or participate in their class or raise their hand because, they don't want to have rejection or anything like that. So they're getting away from education as though reading and learning were somehow not masculine. And the crazy part of that is that a lot of the areas of study, even in the humanities, right? Like in history and art and literature and music, you study any of those, the majority of the syllabus are all men. men. They're the male creators. That's
Good
the
point.
history of it. And somehow we have made learning to be some sort of a submissive feminine thing. And maybe it's because when you learn, when you are curious, there is this underscoring acceptance that you don't know everything and somebody else has to assist you. As a result of this like hyper masculine, it's not even masculine. I don't even know what it is. It's a different beast because
Yeah.
masculinity requires virtue, which requires practice. It requires thinking. Like when you have the virtue of justice, for instance, justice implies an other. You can't be just all by yourself. Or even the virtue of courage implies other people. You can't be courageous in solitude. So somehow we have, shifted this idea that you're supposed to be the go-getter and fake it till you make it and know everything and be in charge. And then removing the joy of actually building the skill set to be a leader, an example, not a dominant force, but a leader.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think when you start consuming this content, anything that is viewed as feminine is horrible. Like you don't want to do anything that is viewed as feminine. For example, feminism is a bad word to these people. In fact, when I debated Andrew, he basically said it's a foul language word in his mind. When I think of feminism, I often think of Bell Hooks' The Will to Change, which I think is one of the best feminist books I've come across. Men feel like they're only loved for their value, but I often feel like that's because that's what men have made it to be. Versus Bell Hooks, who says, men, have you tried being loved just for being who you are? And I think there's a lot of internal work that doesn't get done by men. For example, therapy is considered feminine. And I don't understand that because to me, therapy is just like looking at kind of like your default settings and adjusting them. And I think it can be very masculine to look inward, work on yourself and say, I want to be the best version of myself. What's hindering me from doing that? It could be things from your past. It could be things you're not even aware of. But these red pill guys will never, they'll say, go get money, go get fit, go achieve things. They will never say, go to therapy. And I don't understand that. And I think it's because maybe they don't want their audience to fix themselves or look inward or get educated. So they would rather keep them angry, stuck, and doing the things that are considered traditional masculinity, which is working out and making money, I guess.
When you interview women, is there anything that's really stood out to you or surprised you? Were there any statistics in your research or interviews and you thought, oh my goodness, I hadn't thought of that?
I will say the thing that has shocked me the most is when I've asked some women, would you date a guy who listens to Andrew Tate? 99% say no, but there are women who say yes and they have no problem with it. That shocked me a little bit because I don't know. I just don't think he's a role model. He basically says if he has a woman, they belong to him. And I just don't understand why you'd be okay with your partner listening to that. But to each their own. But that's probably the most shocking thing. Other than that, I haven't been as surprised as I thought I would be. I think I listened to enough of the red pill stuff that I was expecting more answers that fall in line with that when I ask women, especially I go to Newport Beach to ask these questions, which you would think, based on, I think what we know about Southern California, that area can be very superficial. It's not always the case. And I find that very interesting. There's a lot of women that I've interviewed when I talk to them about a first date with a guy. And they're like, a lot of guys think it needs to be this fancy dinner. But honestly, if you say, let's get in and out and go talk on the beach, that's a pretty good date for some of these women. That's like someone called it a California first date. I never thought of that, but I was like, okay, well, a lot of guys probably don't even think like that. They think, oh, this woman only wants me to spend a lot of money and I don't want to invest and I don't want to do this because I don't know where it's going to go. And it becomes very transactional. So I think that has been a little surprising that I think even some of the superficial responses I was expecting aren't necessarily there.
Now I want In and Out. That sounds like a great first date, In
I
and Out
agree.
on the beach.
I agree. When that woman said that, I was like, yeah, I don't know why these guys overthink it. I am writing something that I'm going to release soon called the Attraction Handbook. And I do talk about stuff like this. It's like 40 pages. I really try to make it as digestible as possible because I want to give guys as much guidance as I can. Because I do think the criticism that I get the most is that I criticize Red Pill. I call it out. I call out the creators. I try to bring awareness to it, but I don't offer an alternative. I think that's pretty fair. I never thought I needed to come up with an alternative. It seems like men need guidance. They need some sort of map to follow. I guess when I was trying to do my own inner work, I read a lot of books. I did my own reading. I did my own research. I never like looked to one person or one philosophy to guide my life. But it does seem like a lot of young men, that's what they want. They want like something they can point to say, this is what I believe in. I believe in red pill and these are the principles. Or I believe in, I mean, red pill is kind of the main one right now, but it does seem like, or maybe even stoicism. I read Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. I read a lot of the Stoic books. I think there's a lot of great stuff in there, but I don't necessarily make my life around that. But it does seem like I need to offer an alternative to try to guide men. A lot of the stuff that red pill claims to do for men is like build your confidence, build your physical strength, build your internal fortitude and all these other things. But I want to do that because I do think that's valuable. I do think men need to do all these things, but do it without the misogyny. That's all it takes. Do it without the hatred and the bitterness. That's the alternative I'm trying to bring.
You're right. I was teaching an engineering ethics course for a really long time, and it dawned on me that in the ethics course, we were going over engineering failures and disasters and what everybody did wrong. And I thought, wait, the engineering students need to look at need to be able to see what does a good engineer look like. And so I started finding examples to present that because I couldn't just say, here's the ones who were evil or negligent and did everything wrong. Don't do that. I needed to have that. I mean, you're absolutely right. What are images of men with their children or treating their partners well? Even something I play for my daughter in the morning to help her get up is Snoop Dogg did this little rap thing that was for motivate. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
like for kids?
Yeah, my friend showed it to me. Yeah.
Yes. And it's fun in the morning because it gets her all energized. Now that would be an example. He's evolved over the years. He, has money, has wealth, has talent, has a masculine persona. At the same time, doing this thing for children, it doesn't in any way subtract or negate his masculinity. In fact, it adds to it. And so I think that we need more images of that. So I'm wondering, when you started, how far were you in your journey when you realized, oh, this is catching on, this is a thing? What was a marker for you?
On my channel?
Yeah.
It happened so fast. My first few street interviews I posted, they didn't get many views. I think I was around maybe 5,000 followers when I went to whatever. And then I posted my opening statement where I basically declared war on Red Pill. That video blew up. And after that, I was, I think, 2 months in and I had, I don't even know what to say. Probably like 40,000 followers or something like that, like very quickly. It happened very fast. It happened faster than I expected. And I don't want to say faster than I wanted because I wanted to go fast, but I was not as prepared with my long-term plan as I needed to be at that point. Like I said, my biggest criticism, I remember when I debated Andrew and I brought up all the points about red pill and how it's dangerous and how men aren't thriving on it. And he said, okay, what's your alternative? And I kind of got stunned and I was like, I don't know.
I see. Okay, yes, you still have to work through these ideas.
Yes.
Well, I think it's fabulous, and that's also very exciting. The fact that within just a couple of months of you posting this, that it resonated with so many people. That's also a really, really good sign.
Yes, I agree. And there's some other guys out there that I think started to blow up quickly. There's a guy named Johnny, your big brother. He's on TikTok. He might be on Instagram as well. He does really good positive masculinity content. I really appreciate his work as well. So yes, there is a thirst for this kind of content because I think it's a pendulum. We've seen the red pill stuff. It's like, okay, let's swing it the other way now and find content that can guide men in the right direction now.
Rafael, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciated you inviting me and I really enjoyed the conversation. I really appreciate what you're doing as well. So thank you.
Aw, thanks. Good is in the Details is produced by Dr. Gwendolyn Dolske and Rudy Salo. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to check out the show notes for all of the relevant links and to join our Patreon for all the extra content. And you can sign up and get a free copy of Philosophy Unplugged. We have another book that's in the works. We'll keep you posted. So when you're on Patreon, you get to see all of the latest stuff and behind the scenes. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, AvonmoreInc.com. It's that small bridge bridge business that started in the 90s and grew to an international sensation among bridge players. Go to avonmoreinc.com and let them know Good is in the Details sent you. You can connect with us on Blue Sky, on Instagram, on Facebook, and I'm on TikTok at Dolske. If you have an idea for the show, or if you'd like to be a sponsor of an episode, get in touch, goodisinthedetailspod@gmail.com. Okay, until next time, bye.